Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth, alongside the giggling idiot Phil Duvall.
You were so serious just then.
Well, we're talking about a fairly serious subject today.
Oh, I forgot. Okay. So I have to be. Okay, hold on. Go ahead.
You are the worst person I know. It's been a while since I've said that.
It's been like 3 days, but okay.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. In our relationship, that's a while.
You're right.
So
Right.
we are turning to a serious topic, but I hope it will not be a somber topic. The passing of an important voice in American and world cinema, as everyone watching this knows. This week, Roger Ebert died, and
I for one thought you were going to say Annette Funicello, but fine.
Annette Funicello also died. More interesting to me because I have a family member with multiple sclerosis,
Yeah.
but not the same kind she did. Nowhere near as serious.
Hmm.
Um, and let's be honest, I love
I
her,
know. I'm making light of a situation. Roger Ebert is a very important figure in modern film history.
and he's actually extremely important to me,
Right.
which is why I think I want Phil to start this off
Oh, okay.
because he is not important to you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, but I've been reading more of him lately, and I was watching some clips of him after he died, and maybe it's just nostalgia. I forgot how much I liked hearing him talk.
Sure.
I, you are more. I think you were intro. I don't know. Based on conversations we've had, you are really well acquainted with his writing.
Yes. By the way, periodically through this, and guys, I apologize if I am more rambly even than usual because I have a lot of thoughts and I haven't really organized them. But periodically, I will be reading snippets of his reviews, which
Right.
are freaking brilliant. I'm sorry. Please continue.
And I guess I have never thought of movie reviews as literature. Um,
Hmm.
and I have read a lot of his reviews though, and I and
Yeah.
I and I do think he's good. Don't get me wrong, and I think he's important. I recognize inherently Roger Ebert's importance
Mm-hmm.
in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
and and the way that in popularizing the idea of film criticism, um, in making it feel smart without being overly snobby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think he was really important to movie nerds and movie critics.
Yes.
Don't necessarily think he was important to movies, but that's a different. I have never been as much a fan of, and this is going to shock
Okay.
people. I'm much more a fan of watching movies than I actually am about listening to people talk about them, considering what we do. But here's the thing, um, and I'll say more about, or I should say, of film criticism.
Sure.
I'm much more, and when Andy and I started doing this show, when we even were pitching around the idea of it, I said, I'm not interested in critiquing movies. I'm
Right.
interested in talking about movies, which I
Yeah.
do see as different.
Yeah. I agree.
We can talk about that later when I go into sort of but what doesn't work for me about Roger Ebert. But I will say, um, he's clearly a movie fan who got to be a movie fan
Professionally.
professionally and nationally.
Yes.
That's cool. And reading other why he was important to other people this past week has been really interesting to me.
Sure.
He was not important to me other than when I was a kid and there was this show where he and Siskel talked about movies, and it was one of the ways that I got to find out what was coming out soon.
Yeah.
Because it's, by the way, the first time I ever heard of the Evil Dead series was, I remember sitting in my parents' room, watching a TV, watching at the movies, and watching Siskel and Ebert review Evil Dead 2, and
Yes.
seeing this blood splatter on a light bulb and being like, what is going on?
Yes.
So from that aspect, I remember them and the idea of them as characters in our culture, but I never thought their opinions were important to me growing up. And I
Mm-hmm.
never really got into film reviews growing up. I never let a film review, I shouldn't say never. By and large, I didn't let film reviews, I didn't read film reviews, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't let them decide whether or not I was going to see something.
Sure. Uh,
Does that make sense?
it does. Can I respond to
Oh, yeah,
that?
of course, absolutely.
I neither did I. Neither did I. Siskel and Ebert and the movies was syndicated,
Mm-hmm.
so I never knew when it was coming on. It was on the
Yeah,
weekends,
that's
and
right.
when I happened to be in front of the television and it happened to be on that channel when it was on, I was like, awesome, you know.
Right.
But honestly, it wasn't for the reasons that people who are older than we are watch. It wasn't for like the intelligent banter and bickering of Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. It was I get to see snippets of movies that are coming out like trailers, right? And it's stuff that isn't in the trailer, right?
Right.
So it didn't really enter my consciousness, but um, I was not always the robo geek of movies that you see sitting before you. And when I was bitten by the radioactive spider and became superpowered, was my first couple years in New York City.
Hmm.
I was waiting tables, I was auditioning here and there, but I had a lot of time in the middle of days.
Yeah.
And it was right when Netflix was getting popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, I fancy myself a movie fan, a film fan. But I had never seen a Fellini film. I had only seen one Kurosawa film, and that was not one of his big ones.
Mm-hmm.
It was for a class in college. I had not seen Truffaut. I was woefully underprepared on Hitchcock, even. And so I had not seen Double Indemnity, for example. Like film noir. So many classics. Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Mm-hmm.
Just so many. And around the same time as I was getting 3 DVDs delivered to me several times a week, because I would just watch them and put them right back in the mail. I lived down the street from a post office, so it was like perfect. I was Netflix's nightmare customer, basically. You know,
You're the one they were
uh,
losing money on.
that's right. That's right. That whole thing where
I
they
still
had
think you're the
they
one they lose money on.
that's true. Yeah, right. Um,
I was
Around the
bankrolling
same
you, by the way,
time,
because I would have the same DVD for a month.
it's true. It's true. There were some periods of that, but frighteningly few. Most of the time, I was churning them out.
Oh, I'm saying I was that guy. I was
No, I know,
bankrolling.
and I did that too. I think everyone who has a Netflix subscription for more than 3 weeks has had that period, right?
Yeah.
Um, but around the same time, I discovered RogerEbert.com, and it was an archive of all, not quite all, but they kept putting up, and it got to be pretty close to every single review he had written since 1967.
Yeah.
Searchable by movie title, director, actor, sometimes cinematographer, just crazy stuff. And one of the things that he did was he had a list called Ebert's Great Movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I don't even know how many movies there were on there, but I basically made that list my Netflix queue. Werner Herzog, I'm not even sure I had heard the name before Ebert introduced me to him, and I love the guy now.
Mm-hmm.
And not just because he played the villain in Jack Reacher a couple months ago. Although that was totally Werner Herzog and totally awesome and weird. Um, he it it's one of these chicken and the egg things. I do not I am being as honest with myself, and therefore Phil, you and everyone watching this
Sure.
and listening to this, being as honest with myself as I can here. I do not believe that my taste in movies uh, is Roger Ebert's taste. I don't think that we are identical in that
Sure.
way, but I think that we are strikingly similar. And you spoke about him being an important figure in film criticism. I would put forth this. He is one of three people that is in the conversation for the most important film reviewer, along with Pauline Kael and Andrew Sarris. And
Okay.
and frankly, I don't like either of them. Pauline Kael could write, and so could Sarris, but I think they were.
I'll have to take your word for it.
I'm just not a fan of their criticism. I'm not a
But
fan
I'm
of.
saying I'd have to take your word for it. I
Sure.
don't read it. It's a whole thing that I just don't do.
Sure. Ebert was the first person to win a Pulitzer Prize for film criticism. And on Grantland, Wesley Morris, who has recently won a Pulitzer for film criticism for the Boston Globe,
Yeah.
wrote a retrospective of sorts.
Yeah.
And something I want to point out, because we will talk about film criticism in general in a bit, but Ebert, he didn't usually spoil things, but he told you what the plot of the movie was, basically, and then he started discussing it. But Wesley Morris says, a writer I know once told me he didn't read Ebert because he could get a plot summary anywhere. It's true that a typical Ebert review contains mostly plot synopsis, but it's mostly plot synopsis the way diamonds are mostly coal.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I read that to you, it's an interesting turn of phrase. It reminded me of something that Roger Ebert would write. That to me, like, I was like, he was not above a little showmanship in his writing.
Mm-hmm.
But he did not want to tell you if you would like the movie. He wanted to tell you why he liked or didn't like the movie. I will also say this.
I have problems with what you're saying.
I see your face.
I have problems with what you're saying, but go ahead. Big time, but go ahead.
That changed in the last 3 or 4 years of his life.
I'm not even talking about the last 3 or 4 years of his life. I mean,
Okay.
To me, the most problematic thing about Ebert and why I don't dig, why I think his writing is really good, but his writing is not my problem,
Okay.
is that in the end,
Mm-hmm.
he gave movies thumbs up and thumbs down and gave them stars. 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars. And I think that's a load of crap. I just think it's a load of crap. And I think well, hold on, let me say more.
Sure.
I think absolutely when you have a television show, which is a popular medium, and you say to someone thumbs up or thumbs down, you are creating a sense of saying, this is worth your time, you will like this or you won't.
Right.
And so when you say he wasn't saying that, I don't think of him as a person with a lot of hubris when I read his writing, and I think that he was someone who's willing to say, these are the things that I like.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea in general is sitting in judgment. I mean, that's critique, is sitting in judgment. And
Sure.
it is the thing that what I like the idea of, not to, because I'm sure people watch us, and again, if they watch or listen to this podcast and they're like, Phil doesn't like listening to other people talk about movies, what? Like somehow when we do it, it's different. I want to make sure I'm clear. Like, I love thinking about movies, and I love when people make me think about movies, and so I will read his reviews or other reviews. I think Joe Morgenstern is a particularly good writer, and he's gotten to the point where his taste, I just can't even. I think he's so particular. He was a guy that I followed for a while. But then he's so particular that I just was like, I can't even. And I think with Ebert, you at least feel like there's some consistency there. So
Sure.
like you've said this to me before, when I disagreed with Ebert, I at least knew why I disagreed with him and was able to track him. And I think that's a really important thing. And so I would never in any way begrudge your relationship with that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I agree with you. Like, he's so consistent. And I can go online and look up his reviews. I knew he was going to like Midnight in Paris.
Sure.
Even though I thought Midnight in Paris was so mediocre.
Sure.
Knew he was gonna love it, and when he loved it, I was like, aha, and that's
Right.
great. But I just I don't know, man. Like in the end, I have a real problem with thumbs up, thumbs down, and with
Hmm.
giving movies grades or stars. I
Can I
think it's
respond to that?
yes.
Because I have a response to that which you may not be aware of. He hated rating movies. He hated it.
Okay.
He said if I could never give another movie a star rating, I would never do it. And thumbs up and thumbs down became something that I mean he ended up like trademarking it, right?
Sure.
But a large part of that, and he wrote about this quite a bit in his personal writings. I'm such a geek. I've read a lot of them. He I'm not going to say that he didn't like giving movies thumbs up or thumbs down, but I think if I can be a little presumptuous here, Phil, I don't think your problem there is with Ebert. I think you said it, right? It's your problem is with critique in general. Because because if you ask the question like or if you make the statement, somebody else telling me whether or not I should waste my time or give my time to this movie, my response to that, that's a valid question. But my response to that, which I also think is valid, why else does Ebert exist? Right? You can debate whether he should exist,
I
but
think there's no. I mean, okay. Here's the deal. So on one hand, they exist because the actual talking about the film is the fun thing. I get that there are movies that they can just go like. So, for instance, read his review of Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo 2, Bigelow in Europe or whatever,
right,
or just so you can see, like, when someone's just like, you know what, this doesn't deserve to exist. But I almost feel like all he has to do is not talk about that movie at all. Like, Alan Sepinwall is an interesting example of a reviewer I don't always agree with, and Bill Simmons talks about him like he's genius,
mm-hmm.
like he's done something amazing. What I like about Alan Sepinwall, is Alan Sepinwall does this thing. He's a TV reviewer, folks, on a website called Hitflix. Until his contract's up, and then I guarantee you, Bill Simmons will steal him for Grantland. I guarantee it.
Indeed, indeed.
But is that Sepinwall says, I don't want to talk about this TV show anymore because I don't like it, and I don't want to write about how I don't like something over and over and over again. Like, so if he stops, he only writes about the shows that he loves,
Sure.
and then works within the frame of reference of that. And I find that interesting. So there is something to be said for, oh yeah, that movie's not worth your time. Fine, and I get that. Or it just didn't do it for me, and I get that, and I get just by the virtue of the fact that there's two of them, you get that dialogue, and when you have one thumb up and one thumb down, you get that sense of like there's a dialogue happening in disagreement.
Yes.
So I think that's fantastic in and of
Right.
itself. Okay,
Right.
that being said, you can say that my problem is with film critique. The reality is, you can say if I never had to rate movies again, he didn't have to. He chose to. He chose to, especially once he'd gotten so famous. No. At some point, he could have said he had no power to say, I'm not going to star reviews anymore. Come on. He could have just said, I'm not going to give him stars anymore, folks. I just refuse to.
No. I'm not saying and maybe he was wrong about this, okay? I will give that to you. But I'm not saying that he was like, my editor at the Chicago Sun-Times won't let me. Clearly, he had the power from that perspective. But
Yeah.
but by the time he had gotten to the stature that he eventually attained, the star rating was how people did it. It was like
Right.
it was just understood.
So if you have that stature and you hate the star rating, just be like, you know what? The next thing I'm gonna do is show people, let's take the shackles off. No more star ratings. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if he means it.
I just don't think that's. I respect your opinion. I don't think that's a viable option. I just don't.
Morgenstern didn't do stars. A lot of people don't do stars. You don't have to do that stuff.
Okay.
I'm just saying they exist. Like, you don't have to in the end give a movie a grade or a star. It reminds me of that scene in Dead. You don't.
I'm not
You
saying
don't.
you do. That my face is not saying that you do. What I'm saying is, you cannot deny it has become shorthand.
No, you're right, and that's my problem with it.
Fair.
That's my problem with it, is the impact it's had. Is that if it's like that scene in Dead Poet Society when the Professor Keating is like you can't score poetry like American Bandstand, like Byron's pretty great, I'd give him an 8, but you can't dance to him. Like, we have now, like, if you graded a poem by Emily Dickinson, we'd be like, that's absurd. But there's no problem with grading a movie. That is my problem with the culture that he helped create. And so when we talk about his legacy, which again I think is unquestionable, that he has a legacy that is monumental, unquestionably. And when you talk about and you're right, other critics like Wesley Morris look up to him. That's great. And movie fans read his reviews and find what another movie fan thinks. I please hear that I'm not criticizing that stuff, and that I'm not doing that.
Okay.
But I want to reckon with his entire legacy, and to me, he helped foster his popularity. Popularity helped foster a legacy where grading art and giving art a thumbs up or a thumbs down is just perfectly acceptable, and in fact, the way to do it, par for the course. That's really problematic for me.
Here's my response to that. First off, the best thing that you have said was when there was one thumb up and one thumb down, you saw a dialogue, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I don't know that I agree with you that he helped foster the culture of star reviews. And I could be wrong about that, but let me explain why. He was not always as powerful as he became. He did not become that powerful until his television show, and star ratings were everywhere by the time the television show came around. So I don't know that you can pin on him any more than literally any other critic writing at the same time. He created the star rating culture. Hang on.
What's more popular than thumbs up, thumbs down? For movies, as far as movie review.
And my only response to that, Phil, is you go to a film critic to see if you should see a movie. I mean that's why. Well, hang on. Let me check in. Would you agree with that statement? I'm not trying to be difficult. Would you agree with that statement?
I didn't growing up, and that's one of the reasons why it's not important.
Neither did I.
So no. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. I guess, or maybe, but like I just I watch trailers and decide what I want to see. Now
that's not my question. That's not my question. I'm not saying do you decide to see a movie based on a critic. I'm saying when you go and read a critic, why are you going to that critic? Is there another reason other than to decide if you want to see that movie?
I think not, and I think that's probably my problem with critics.
Fair. That's totally fair. I think, and this is pure conjecture on my part. When you started this part of the conversation by saying, sorry, I'm on a swivel chair, and there's no earthquake in Houston right now.
Is this podcast directed by Sam Raimi?
Indeed. Baz Luhrmann. No.
Please never say that name again.
Done.
Thumbs down. Thumbs down.
Thumbs down. You said there is value, at least on some level, even if you don't like it, and I don't either, in just saying, you know what, this movie isn't worth your time, or this movie is. And I think that is what the thumbs up and thumbs down was trying to say. Like,
sure.
Because here's why I think thumbs up and thumbs down is better than the star rating. Okay? Which is a better movie? The Breakfast Club or Die Hard. All right? You might have an opinion on it, but if you break it down, to a star rating, how could you possibly judge the two? And I know that's not what people are doing when they give star reviews, but when you see them, unconsciously, that's what you're doing, right? You're ranking them according to the star rating that they get. But if you just see thumbs up and thumbs down, it's like, oh, this person thinks it's worth my time. If I want to know more, I will read.
Sure.
Everything you said was extraordinarily well stated, and I can't say that I disagree with you. I wonder how much. Interestingly, I wonder how much Ebert is responsible for the film culture. I'm not going to say he isn't. I won't say he's not responsible for it. But
I think if you talk about his legacy and all the things that he's responsible for, and we only talk about the fact that he got people to talk about movies and write about movies, that's really, we've got to talk about the whole legacy. I mean, if he's responsible for this, he's responsible for this.
I have two responses for that. One, I agree with you.
Right.
But two, why is that the case? Is in the mission statement of Second Breakfast, is there something saying we have to be even-handed?
If we're going to be honest about him, I mean, look, because if we're going to be honest, for me, because that is my problem. So what I'm saying is, if you're saying he's responsible for this part of my life, awesome, and I don't begrudge you that at all. Like what you said what you said at the beginning of this whole conversation. Let nothing that I've said take away, or no, it couldn't take away, but make you think that it takes away from me. I respect the crap out of what Ebert has done for you as a film lover. Like,
sure.
I would never want you to feel differently. Does that make sense? Like, I would never want, I don't want at the end of this conversation to have been like, haha, Ebert was terrible. No, that's not the point at all. I'm trying to express two things. Okay. One is partially that I just was never into that, other than the fact that there were people talking about movies and I loved that.
Indeed.
But I also want to talk about what turned me off about what Ebert did.
Okay.
And it's what other film critics did, but if Ebert was this uber film critic, and he was the one who popularized, I mean, he made it popular for I've heard that often throughout the eulogizing that's gone on, is that Ebert and Siskel and Ebert together helped popularize film criticism for the common folk. Part of the way they did that was being gladiator emperors and saying thumbs up, thumbs down on a movie, and they also did things like rate them with stars, and they also did things like top 10 lists, which is like, this movie gets a 7, is the 7th best movie, and this movie is the 6th best movie. And
for most of his life after the show, he largely gave a top 10 list alphabetically.
And I think that's much better.
I agree with you. I agree.
That's great. And again, listen, again, I don't want this to sound like, what you said is great, and I don't question his love of film, and I don't question his impact. What he did later on in life isn't actually as well remembered, or it's really well remembered among film nerds and film critics and film writers, but it's not as well remembered by the general populace. His last few years of writing...
That's interesting, Phil. If I disagree with you, and I don't know that I do, but if I disagree with you, I might say that we're sort of aging out of, a ton of people either don't know who Roger Ebert is these days, or don't know that he had a television show.
I don't believe you.
I have.
Okay.
I mean, look.
I just don't believe you, but that's okay.
I haven't. The sample size that I have conducted my experiment with cannot be called representative.
Sure.
But if you get too much younger than us, they weren't on the air.
Okay. But the ones that are writing the ones who are writing reviews and are right now that are active and are working and have claimed influence by him,
that's true.
Are our age or older.
Exactly.
And the way that when we talk about his stature, the way he attained his stature, was through
no
at the
argument there.
movies.
No
When he
argument
won
there.
his
It's through
Pulitzer,
the TV
it
show.
was when he won his Pulitzer, it was back in the day. He didn't win his Pulitzer like last year. He won it back in the day.
Well, I
And
mean
that's
that's
all
true,
great.
but
That's all cool. But
yeah.
so when we talk about his legacy, a big, huge chunk of his legacy comes from back in the day, and what and that's the part that I'm wrestling with. I
And
love.
I guess the only thing I'd say is uh, it's a weird catch-22 because yes, that's when he was that's what he is remembered for now. And that is shall we say the most vivid part of his legacy. But when he was living it, he had he had he was not as autonomous as he became in later years.
Okay, and I hear that, and I hear that. Although again, I would just go back to he still did stars, but fine. But I hear you, and you're right. And I think like I know that he was a his stature rose among the Conoscenti and among the film fans later on. Like he cultivated this sort of thing once he got online, and I don't know for all of the online movie geeks and online movie reviewers and stuff like that that have made their bones, like made their money and made their livings, like Ain't It Cool News and places like that. His shrewdness and how he used the internet, and I use the word shrewdness with the utmost respect. Like I look at his reviews more than a lot of other reviewers just because they're so easily accessible. Like so easily accessible. Just really, you can look them up you can go to rogerebert.com, and it'll take you to it's not even that's not even the name of the website. It's actually it's on Chicago Tribune or whatever, but it goes straight to it.
Since his death, this is actually separate. They were moving it to rogerebert.com. You're absolutely right.
And that's fine, but it's interesting enough that it was smart enough that when you typed in Roger Ebert, he had that, and it filtered right to the newspaper website, and it was a searchable column. He knew how to do stuff like that, and he did stuff like Movie Answer Man, where people would ask questions, and he would give factoids, and he was clearly a movie lover, and would talk not just about himself, but about things that he loved, and I think stuff like that is fantastic, and whereas I love the template of the movies that just like geek out about movies, generally the writers are just nowhere near the quality of his writing. And as you said, his consistency, not just his ability to write, but his consistency, you know what you're going to get. You don't necessarily know what he's going to say. One thing that I love about this, about what Ebert was for you, and I think you have something that I don't have, and I think it's a really great thing. You and I've been watching movies fanatically much longer than you have, but you've seen movies. Like you were like, oh, I always thought of myself as a movie fan, but never saw Truffaut movies. I've never seen a Truffaut movie, so. And
that just
by
means
the
I'm more
way,
pretentious than you. But go on.
It does a little bit, but I'm pretty pretentious. I mean, I'm pretty pretentious. I just never. I don't know, and the thing is, I will watch it. I mean, I'm pretentious enough to record for the 400 blows on my DVR, but not to actually watch it. Does that make sense?
Not only does that make sense, Phil, but to be perfectly honest with you, I think that's the best possible course of action.
No, but that's the one that everyone's like the 400 blows.
I know.
I will. I'm not going to say never just because I say it, someone will probably give me money or dare me or whatever.
Right.
I will never see the Bicycle Thieves, no matter what. Like,
I mean,
but I'm saying to be a movie lover, you have to have done those things. So you've done a lot of the things. You've hit a lot of the marks. But that's not the thing I want to say. What I want to say, and I respect you as a movie fan and as a movie thinker tremendously. But what I want to say is, you did this thing where you found a voice to be in dialogue with.
Yes.
So Roger Ebert dying is a dialogue partner for you.
Yes.
And I never had it.
Sure.
And so that's a really important thing to have when you develop a love for something.
Yeah.
There's going to be a day and I've said this name before. That's fine. I talk about it too much. That's fine. I don't care. There's gonna be a day when Bob Dylan dies.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand, well, some people do, but a lot of people don't know about me is it's not just that I love his music. It's that he's an artist that I've been in dialogue with.
Yeah.
Although he has not been consciously a part of that dialogue. That's part of what happens with public lives. But it's not just his music. It's actually and it's not just his music, it's also his interviews, but it's not just his music and his interviews. I have found through clips and interviews and things he said, music that he listens to. And then he did a radio show on XM for several years where he was playing his music not music of his own, but music that he liked. I have been introduced to more music through Bob Dylan. As in not just Bob Dylan music, but other people's music than anyone else. The second in that list actually is Martin Scorsese. Through his soundtracks, I have been introduced to music. But I have been introduced to more music through Bob Dylan than anyone else in the world. And so when he dies, I will lose a dialogue partner. And because music is such an important part of my life, when the Newtown massacre happened in Connecticut, it was Newtown. I want to say that right? I don't want to get the name wrong. Sandy Hook Elementary.
Yeah.
I went to Bob Dylan's. I went to a song. I went to "Hard Rain's Gonna Fall," and I wrote a whole sermon bouncing off of that song. Mm-hmm. It was a dialogue partner with me working out how I dealt with this thing. So to me, you have that in film. I don't have it. The closest thing I have is you.
That is
like you're my dialogue partner, except I've been watching movies forever, so you're like my dialogue partner after we've been talking about them. But
right
now when I watch movies, Andy, I'm like, I wonder what Andy thought about that. Or we're doing this thing where you're educating me on horror movies.
Yeah.
And so you're my Ebert when it comes to that.
Well, first off, that's unbelievably flattering and touching, and I appreciate that. Second, I don't know what it says, and I don't think I want to think about it too hard, that your dialogue partner for the thing that is most important to you in terms of an art form is an actual artist, and my dialogue partner is a commentator on the art. I'm not sure I want to delve into what that means.
Sure.
But I think that's very well said. And that gets back to what I was saying earlier. I honestly don't think he, I have never liked or disliked a movie because Ebert liked or disliked it.
Sure.
But I can't deny that I became the film nerd that I am through that time period when I was watching Netflix. And everything I got was from Ebert. Everything. Now, part of that is, I mean, I had found a guy that I basically agreed with, and if I had gone to Joe Morgenstern, it's not like he had a different list of movies that he reviewed, right? They were the same movies, right? I actually don't know that because I don't know if Joe Morgenstern does a lot of reviewing of movies before from decades past. And
for the record, I just want to say, because I brought him up as someone I was reading, I don't think he's in the. I mean, especially when it comes to legacy, he's not in the same ballpark, and that's
fair. But he's a name.
He's a respected reviewer. He's a respected modern reviewer, and he's someone that, like I said, I appreciate him because he doesn't do stars or thumbs up or thumbs down. He just talks about what he thinks about something, and I like that.
Sure.
But anyway, so continue. But it's really hard. His reviews are nowhere near as accessible as Ebert's, by the way. It's very frustrating.
I found something. I found Ebert, and I don't want to rehash because I think we came to kind of a beautiful understanding of it, of the situation. I found Ebert talking about both the star system and thumbs up and thumbs down.
Okay.
And I would love to read it to you. This is a blog post entitled "You Give Out Too Many Stars." That's what some people tell me. Maybe I do. Apparently on Metacritic, he on a 100-point scale, he averages 8.9 points higher than the average movie critic. Part of my problem may be caused by conversion of the detested star rating system. I consider 2.5 stars to be thumbs down. They consider 62.5 to be favorable. Right. But let's not mince words. On average, I do grade higher than other critics. When I started, I considered 2.5 to be a perfectly acceptable rating for a film I rather liked in certain aspects. Then I started doing the TV show and ran into another wacky rating system, the binary thumbs. Up or down, which is it? Gene Siskel boiled it down. What's the first thing people ask you? Should I see this movie? They don't want a speech on the director's career. Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. That made sense, but in the paper it had the effect of nudging a lot of films from 2.5 stars to 3. And he goes on, but he says the problem comes with the movies in the middle. Those movies that, in a perfect world, would have that dialogue where, one thumb would be up and one thumb would be down. But that doesn't invalidate anything you've said.
Right.
I find that interesting. If he was not as diligent in combating these two systems as he could have been, he was at least thinking about them.
Sure. And he's a thinker.
To the end.
Yeah, and I'm just attracted to guys like, and I'm attracted to guys like Bob Dylan, who one thing he's famous for is just being difficult.
Sure.
Like they would have been like he won an award in like '63 from a liberal social organization that was like, way to be this liberal person. And he just got up and was like, y'all are full of crap. And he was like 24. And like these people were like honoring him.
Yeah.
And saying, you're amazing. And he was just like, this is nonsense.
Nope. Yeah.
And he just tore him up and then walked away. But he went. So sure. Like, or if you really like, and so I'm attracted to that, like, if you there's a movie, like, he's famous for being a jerk to reviewers, but to interviewers, but he's not a jerk to every interviewer. What you realize is what I think happens with Dylan, and back to him, is that when he figures out, or when he decides that you're not someone who gets what he's trying to say, it's like the mask goes down, and he has no problem like seeming like a terrible person to you. Because he's decided within himself, for whatever reason, your opinion doesn't matter anymore. And so he'll just torch a reviewer, or toy with them, or lie. Just lie. And it's a show to him. Now, that's not good or bad. I just love it. But,
Fair.
Like, to me, there's an integrity to that.
Sure.
And so I guess what I'm like, I think Ebert is really, really, like, I think he's a really good movie writer, and a guy that's really important in a lot of ways. But the part of his legacy that to me is part of his legacy is a legacy of feeding into something and being the most popular at something that I think is a really negative aspect. Like, Fair. And that's the deal. Like I said, he would agree with me, and you would agree with me, that film is art.
Yep.
And I would say you don't grade art. But I mean, it's just, it's just tricky. I mean, it's just, but it's
tricky. It's tricky on a number of levels, right? I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but I mean, and this is an oversimplification, because again, he grew to an extraordinary stature, but you got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right. Right.
And if nothing else, you have 400 words or 500 words or 2.5 minutes on a television show to talk about a movie, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's his decision to do that for the sake of paying the bills, so to speak.
Well, right.
You don't have to do the dance if you don't like the dance. I mean, I don't know Pauline Kael. Did she do numbers and stars and grades? And
I have only read her in places where I wouldn't have seen that.
Okay.
like copied
Right.
and on web pages and stuff.
Right.
Um,
It's just interesting to me, movies and TV are a very weird, are a very strange art form because they're populist. And if you like a snobby movie, that's like something wrong with you. You know what I mean? Like, part of a movie is it needs to be entertaining, but I would say part of art, a painting, is that it just needs to be attractive on some level.
sure.
Like, and art that's ugly needs to be ugly in a way that's attractive. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like a pug, you know.
Nice.
So no,
I want to talk about that.
but people, no one would dare say, yeah, but should I really go look at Monet's water lilies? Like, should I actually look at it?
Right, but when he painted it, maybe they did.
And yeah, and that to me is like a
And
very
there are art critics.
there are.
There are art critics. I mean,
And again,
at the most base level, Phil, I completely agree with you. It makes me crazy that we're grading art, but there has to be some expediency. And if you're not interested, then just read a plot summary and say, "Will I like this movie?" And I don't. And I'm not going to go to the critic, right?
so I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question. I want to know if this makes me a total hypocrite after everything I've just said.
Okay.
This might make me a total hypocrite.
Okay.
I will go to Rotten Tomatoes and look at the aggregate on a regular basis. Now, if I want, so in the end, although that's interesting because they'll take reviews that they decide they have to figure out if it's a fresh tomato or a rotten tomato based on the review, even if the reviewer doesn't give a grade.
Right. That's right.
Which is interesting.
That is interesting.
I'm basically going to something that is an aggregate of thumbs up, thumbs down
Yes.
to decide.
Yes. That's true.
And but it's almost like instead I don't I don't know. I'm not even gonna defend myself. I'm probably a total hypocrite.
I don't think so. I don't think so because at the end of the day, your integrity is not the question.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here saying, here's my problem with his legacy.
Right. But if this makes sense, I don't think he'd be entirely comfortable with that part of his legacy. And you're right, he didn't do enough in your mind to change it.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you're right. I mean, you've said that from the beginning, right? Like, look, he probably wasn't comfortable with that. But the difference between you and I is you had a personal relationship. Not that you knew him, but your relationship with Ebert is personal.
Absolutely.
Mine isn't.
That's fair.
And so like when you say he was uncomfortable with that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, great. And so you've been able to have that interaction with him in the sense of reading his stuff and thinking about that. Whereas to me, I just was like, what the hell's a guy doing thumbs up and thumbs down on a movie? Like, how do you give and I mean,
right.
like,
But here's why I don't think you're a hypocrite, and it goes back to the Gene Siskel quote from Ebert's blog post. What's the first thing people ask you? Should I see the movie?
Right.
We're not talking about, frankly, Phil, we're not talking about people like you, because you don't go to critics to ask them. Like, you'd be like...
That's right.
You might ask them something else. Like, let's
talk
about Breakfast Club.
I'd say? Unless a movie is just god-awful.
Mm-hmm.
A couple years ago, because I see a lot of movies and you see a lot of movies, and so friends of ours will ask us, well, you're a movie person, should I see this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it a good movie?
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part now, what I say is, I don't know, I liked it. I mean, and that may seem like a cop-out to people, but I'll say I liked it or I didn't like it. The only person I will answer that question for,
mm-hmm.
two people that I will answer that question for.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and my
mm-hmm.
wife.
Sure.
My mom and my wife. And my mom, by the way, I was wrong. I've been more and more wrong lately. She was like, should I see Lincoln? And I was like, or she was like, will I like Lincoln? And I was like, you will. And she was like, you're wrong, I didn't. I was like, wait a minute, you're testing me?
Nice.
So anyways.
Interestingly, Phil, I say pretty much the same thing. I'm like, well, here's what I liked about it, here's what I didn't, here's what I thought it was successful, here's what I thought was
right.
I liked about it. But do you know why I do that? Honestly, and I'm not just saying this, I am modeling myself after Roger Ebert. Okay. Because if you were to because
then
if
you are a poor model.
What do you say?
Then you are a poor model because he gave thumbs up and thumbs down and stars.
And then talked about it.
Fine. But there is a judgment, a final judgment that is tallyable, and that's bothersome to me. Except
Right.
for when I'm on Rotten Tomatoes.
That you saying, "Well, I liked it," is a judgment that the other person is going to go by?
No, I mean anything I say is an opinion or a judgment. I get that,
No,
right?
I'm not being semantic. I'm actually asking though. You say that you don't answer that question, and what I'm saying to you is, for the person asking you the question, they've gotten their answer.
I know, but they're going to take what they're going to take from it. There's nothing I can do. By the virtue of the fact that they're asking me, there's no right. The only way to not give judgment is to go like this and just like not answer. And I'm not enough Bob Dylan to do that. I don't have enough in me to just be like, not answering your question at all.
Okay, well, here's what I'll give you, and then we gotta move on because we've been talking about this for a while, and I'm
Is
just
that what I'm
depressed.
saying?
Not because of anything you've done, but I want to remember the good things.
As well you should, and I don't want to take away from that.
What I will say is this: Roger Ebert, he was no Bob Dylan.
And
Yeah.
Bob Dylan was no Roger Ebert, to be fair.
Well, I mean that may or may not be true. I cannot make that value judgment.
I'll make it. I'll make it
Fair
for
enough. I
But
want to do some more reading
Okay.
because this is amazing. And you brought it up earlier, and I don't know if you brought it up because you knew it or just because it's become like shorthand for a terrible movie.
you. No. I mentioned the Deuce Bigelow thing on purpose because of
Yes.
what he does, which is pull rank in a way that's beautiful.
It is amazing.
But by the way, it's not movie review. It's not a movie review when he does what he does.
No, it is not. It is not.
In the words of every fake movie preview, this time it's personal.
Indeed. But what's interesting to me is it's not personal for him. He's coming to the defense of another critic. A critic, Patrick Goldstein of the Los Angeles Times, just skewered Deuce Bigelow, European Gigolo, the not quite as successful and critically acclaimed sequel to Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo. Which, is there a female Gigolo? Is that movie title dumb in another way? Yes.
My mama told me that if I didn't have anything nice to say, then to shut up.
Nice. Well, you know what, Phil? You're not a hypocrite. I, however, am. So
I just can't say anything about Rob Schneider. I can't say anything.
Basically, Rob Schneider took out an ad in Variety and the Hollywood Reporter and was like, "I don't have to listen to your opinion. You haven't won anything. You haven't won a Pulitzer. You haven't won any awards at all." And then Roger Ebert weighs in. Reading this, meaning the ad, I was about to observe that Schneider can dish it out, but he can't take it. Then I found he's not so good at dishing it out either. I went online and found that Patrick Goldstein has won, and he lists all of these awards that he has won. Schneider was nominated for a 2000 Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actor, but lost to Jar Jar Binks. But Schneider is correct, and Patrick Goldstein has not yet won a Pulitzer Prize. Therefore, Goldstein is not qualified to complain that Columbia financed Deuce Bigelow, European Gigolo, while passing on the opportunity to participate in Million Dollar Baby, Ray, The Aviator, Sideways, and Finding Neverland. As chance would have it, I have won the Pulitzer Prize, and so I am qualified. Speaking in my official capacity as a Pulitzer Prize winner, Mr. Schneider, your movie sucks.
It's genius. It is. It's genius.
And the thing that I want to
there's a BuzzFeed.
Go for it.
There's a
Buzz 20 most epic.
Yeah, but 20 most. There's a website for those of you who don't know called BuzzFeed.com, and there's a BuzzFeed article about the 20 most epic Ebert put-downs, and it is glorious.
It is. Oh. Yes.
Glorious.
There's something, and I don't remember what movie it's for. But he says the movie builds to an anticlimax, which is an insult to the word climax and the word anti, and two hyphens.
Yeah, it's pretty genius.
But he loved something you said that I really identified with was he was just a movie lover, man. You know what movie he loved and not every important critic did? Bonnie and Clyde. Who was right about that one? You know?
I don't like Bonnie and Clyde, so I guess somebody. I guess he
Nice.
was.
I happen to love it. Um,
I need to see it
and
again. I saw it in high school. I saw it in high school and didn't care for it, but
see it
I'm
again,
willing.
dude.
Well,
It's awesome.
I will because it's on the list.
Nice. He loved Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, as other people were calling it vulgar and depraved. He was saying no.
Right.
It is about vulgarity. It is about being depraved, and that is, honestly, that's such a brilliant insight that makes that seems. It seems obvious now because we're on the other side of it. But he was one of the only critics who was championing someone like George Romero, right?
Right.
Because and I don't think Ebert would say that Romero was a good filmmaker because he isn't. He's problematic. But his ideas, never more evident than in Dawn of the Dead, are brilliant. And Ebert was like, you know what? I love something about this movie, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The last story that I'll tell about Roger Ebert. There is a movie made by a man named Vincent Gallo, titled The Brown Bunny. For those who have heard of it, you may have heard of it because there is an explicit sexual act at the end of the movie.
That is why I have heard of it.
Vincent Gallo premiered this movie at the Cannes Film Festival. And every reviewer who was there has written something about how terrible it was. How people were like if it were a vaudeville show, people would have been throwing tomatoes at the screen. That bad. Like booing in the middle of the movie. And Ebert walked out saying, he declared it the worst movie in the history of the film festival. And then he says, and this is another blog post, this was an unwise thing to do. My policy for years has been to avoid giving a negative review of a festival film until it has a chance to open. Gallo responded, and then Vincent Gallo did this really weird thing. He gave this interview with this French paper that he was sobbing. He was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make a bad film. I'm so sorry. And then Ebert reported on that, just saying, oh, by the way, this happened too.
Right.
Gallo then denied it, as if there isn't a French paper who has the interview on file and in publication. Right. And not only did he deny it, Gallo issued a curse on Roger Ebert's colon. He said, I hope you get cancer. I hope your colon gets cancer. Ebert responded that I had a colonoscopy and the video of it was more entertaining than the brown bunny. Now, that's a brilliant cutting remark, but that is not why I'm telling this story.
Right.
Why I'm telling this story is this. This was a 2-hour movie. And Vincent Gallo, in the months after the Cannes Film Festival, he re-edited it and cut 30 minutes out of it. Now just think. You cut a quarter of the movie. That is insane. People like, oh my God, I took my movie from 2 hours to 1 hour, 58 minutes, and 43 seconds. What a big day, right? He cut a quarter of the movie out of it and released it that way. Roger Ebert not only re-reviewed it, he gave it 3 stars. He said, this is not a completely successful movie, but it is a much better movie, and I can now see the story Gallo was trying to tell. And then he went further, and he said, I don't think Gallo did this. Maybe a special edition has come out where he's done this. But he said, what I think he should do is release both versions on the DVD because people are always asking me, what does an editor do? And this would be a beautiful way to tell them, to show them,
Right.
you know? I find it hard, and I hope I have done it with you as I have disagreed with you. I hope I have done this. I find it hard to speak intelligently and levelly about Roger Ebert because, as you say, he is my dialogue partner.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not a stretch to say that were it not for Roger Ebert, we would not be doing this podcast. Because I would not be doing this podcast. Because I would be the guy that really liked The Breakfast Club and a bunch of other John Hughes movies and some horror movies, but, basically just saw whatever was coming out that Friday, and would never have seen, I would have seen things like Casablanca because my dad would make me, but I wouldn't have ever seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I wouldn't have ever seen Laura,
Right.
And I think, getting back to what we disagreed with, criticism as a thing, it's so tough, right? It's such a tightrope to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not say that he walked it perfectly.
Yeah.
But, and maybe this is another way of saying he was my dialogue partner. He walked it the way that if I were in his position, I would like to walk.
Legit.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. Two things I want to say. One, he gave Look Who's Talking a bad review. And then when it became monstrously, monumentally popular, he went back and re-reviewed it and gave it a better review.
Interesting.
And he said that it was, and I don't have the words in front of me, but basically he said something along the lines of like, it was so popular that I had to really, and so lastingly popular, that I had to really go back and go, did I miss something? And the idea to me that a reviewer would say enough people liked this that I had to think twice.
Nice.
Was amazing to me, and I'll never forget it. The other thing that I really respect, having just bashed the heck out of his star system, is that he has said that he views a movie as being successful or a failure on its own terms.
Yes.
So a movie, and this bothers me about the star system, but it gives some consistency to the way he uses it, which is he will say, this movie was completely successful for what it was. So if you like, read his review of, I believe it's called Drive Angry, the Nick Cage movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I have seen and enjoyed.
That is, you could not have taken the words or the way you said it more out of my mouth. That is, yes.
But his review, I read it before I saw the movie, and it was a very, he gave it 2 stars, and he said he gave it 2 stars, and he said if the goal of a movie, if the movie's goal seems to be to just break every rule and be as disgusting as possible and as exploitative and shocking as possible, this movie gets 4 stars. But it's an unconscionable movie, and I can't give it 4 stars. If it's just on the level of what a movie should be, I have to give it 0 stars. So I split the difference and give it 2.
Awesome.
That to me was a really clever thing to do, and I think the idea of, I respect a reviewer who is able to articulate, you gotta judge a movie, you don't judge Drive Angry by the same standard that you judge Casablanca.
Right. Well, Drive Angry was not as good a movie as Remains of the Day.
Right.
So,
Right.
um,
So I love that, and I for all that I've said, I mean, and I want to say I was very reticent to even do this show about Ebert
I know. I appreciate that you
because
did.
because I recognize the fact that he's important to you in a way that he's not important to me, and I wanted to make sure that anything I said was not a dismissal
Sure.
of how he's been important to you, or a what do you want to what's the word, a denial of his importance to American culture.
Sure.
I respect his stature, and I said to you on the phone when we were discussing it, the very fact that I have issues with what he's done is just proof of his, even more proof of his stature.
Fair.
The fact that I have to have an opinion is proof
Yeah.
of his stature.
Right. Because do you normally go to critics? No, you don't. Have you ever lived in Chicago?
Right.
No, you have not.
Right.
And yet.
Yeah. That's right.
To respond to your last two things, and then we can wrap up. I think. You know what two movies he loved? Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Loved them.
Yeah.
And he was like, I just loved them. And talking about re-reviewing, because he re-reviewed The Brown Bunny, he re-reviewed Look Who's Talking. The sort of the first time he got really sick, in 06, 07, somewhere around there. The movie Once came out, and it is a musical. It is glorious. It is a musical for people who don't love musicals, because it's not what you're thinking when I say musical. And he missed it. He didn't re-review it. He missed it because he was sick when it was on the festival circuit and when it came out, when it got its release. And then but he made a point of reviewing it because it was still sort of the little movie that could, right? It was still a movie that needed all the help it could get from reviewers like him, because when he told you to see a movie, people would see it. And he said this: Once is the kind of film I've been pestered about ever since I started reviewing again. People couldn't quite describe it, but they said I had to see it. I had to. Well, I did. They were right.
Yeah.
And I actually want to end with this. The last blog post he ever wrote was about the exciting things coming for RogerEbert.com, which makes me indescribably sad that he won't be an integral part of it, although of course he will indirectly. But the last thing he said was, "I'll see you at the movies."
That's pretty.
And
that's,
you know,
I found other things to say, and specifically wanted to talk about his opinion of The Graduate, but you got to leave it at that. That's perfect.
tell me this. Just tell me this. Did he like it? Did he not?
Well, that's what's interesting. Is when it came out, he was one of the people that really responded to it positively, and he called it the funniest American comedy of the year.
Okay.
And then he re-reviewed it 30 years later. And here's the opening sentences. Well, here is to you, Mrs. Robinson. You've survived your defeat at the hands of that insufferable creep Benjamin, and emerged as the most sympathetic and intelligent character in The Graduate. How could I have ever thought otherwise? What murky generational politics were distorting my view the first time I saw this film? Watching the 30th anniversary revival of The Graduate is like looking at photos of yourself at an old fraternity dance, and it goes on and on and on.
Awesome.
And he says later on, The Graduate I can clearly see now is a lesser movie. And he goes on and on and on. I find that, again, his willingness to go back and look at different things. And it's not just because he ended up coming to agree with me about that movie. That's not my point. The idea that he would go back and look at a movie again and talk about it differently is a really special thing.
Yeah.
So,
actually, there is one movie above all others, and I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, that I would never have discovered if not for Roger Ebert, and that is Akira Kurosawa's movie Ikiru.
Yep.
Uh, I won't see it, just see it.
Yeah.
And I will leave it at this, I guess. This is the end of his great movie review for Ikiru. I saw Ikiru first in 1960 or 1961. I went to the movie because it was playing in a campus film series and it only cost $0.25. I sat enveloped in the story of Watanabe for 2.5 hours and wrote about it in a class where the essay topic was Socrates' statement, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Over the years, I have seen Ikiru every 5 years or so, and each time it has moved me and made me think. And the older I get, the less Watanabe seems like a pathetic old man, and the more he seems like every one of us. I guess I'll leave that without any comment. Anything else, Phil?
No, man. I'm sorry that he's gone,
Yeah, me too.
and I'm really glad that he existed, and I'm really glad that you found him.
Me too.
Seriously.
Thank you. I know. Roger Ebert, man. Rest in peace. This has been another Second Breakfast. I'm Andy Roth, alongside Phil Duvall. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.